Welcome to the Fierce Kind Mama of Multiples podcast. This podcast is for anyone expecting or currently raising multiples, twins, triplets, or more. I speak to inspiring parents of multiples who have healed from unexpected pregnancies and birthing experiences and who candidly share the highs and lows of raising multiples. I also speak to the professionals that work with multiple birth families. Together, we cover the practicalities of raising more than one baby at a time, as well as enhancing the emotional well-being of caregivers and children alike. Come join us as we laugh, cry, and share our personal and professional wisdom on all things multiples. I am your host, Dr. Christina Kvetsa, and I am a fierce kind mama of multiples. On today's episode, I'm joined by Caitlin Sopp. She's a mother to 4-year-old boy-girl twins. No, they aren't identical, and yes, she does surprisingly still get asked that question. Caitlin is also a perinatal psychologist. She has a solo private practice in Perth, Western Australia, and has a special interest in supporting women who have experienced challenges during conception, pregnancy, birth, and parenting. She has an extra special interest supporting parents of multiples given her own experience. Despite working as a perinatal psychologist prior to her own pregnancy, she still found the early years of parenting rough. In fact, I think this is what I really liked about this episode with Caitlin, is that despite her professional experience, she candidly shares how difficult multiple birth parenting can be. So I think if you're in the thick of it right now, or you're worried about how you're going to go, what I'd really like you to take from this episode is that your experience is completely normal. Many other people, even professionals, feel the same way you do. You're not alone. And I hope from this episode that you also get some useful tips on how to make your multiple birth parenting journey easier. So I'd love to welcome on today's episode, Caitlin Sopp. Lovely to have you here, Caitlin.
Lovely to be here, Christina. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Caitlin, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, the work that you do, and your personal and professional multiple birth journey?
I always lead with, I am a mum of twins. I have 4-year-old boy-girl twin, Monica and Thomas. And outside of that, in my professional setting, I'm a perinatal psychologist. So my focus is on working with people across their journey through fertility, becoming parents, pregnancy, birth, and adjusting to parenthood. I have a real special interest in working with families of multiples. I think once you've been through it and you realise all the nuances of it, I had a really tough time at the start after their birth and the first couple of years. I feel like I'm really coming out of the fog now that they're 4. I'm really loving motherhood and being a parent of twins. And so I just love to support people on their journeys, share what I've learned, hopefully make it a little bit easier for them.
Yes, wonderful. And what was it like? So you were a perinatal psychologist before you became a mother to twins.
Yeah.
And how did that, did that training and that background, do you feel like it helped you in your journey, or do you still feel like there were some things about becoming a multiple birth parent that you just really couldn't prepare yourself for? And that, how'd that play out for you?
I actually feel in some ways it made it a lot harder. A lot of the research about parenting, a lot of the research about infant care, it is geared to singletons. So I had this understanding of attachment and these guidelines about parenting that I had learned at uni, that I was sharing with families that I worked with, mainly singleton families. And it just doesn't cut it with twins. So I felt, especially in the first year, I had a really hard time trying to reconcile this knowledge that I had about how I wanted to parent and the actual reality of how I needed to parent having twins. So in some ways it made it a bit trickier. I used to joke, I wish I wasn't a psychologist. I wish I didn't know any of this. I also felt it led to me putting a lot more pressure on myself. everyone in my social circle, oh, you're going to be great at this. You're going to be so good. You know, you work with mums, you work with babies, you know all of this. And I think like every mum I've worked with, it doesn't matter what your training or your background is, nothing can prepare you for being a parent to your own kids. I also found that some of the stuff I knew about mental health, it was harder to apply when it was me. Easy to share with other people, harder to do. And unfortunately, it led to some feelings of shame. I created this expectation that other people had helped me create, that I was going to be amazing at this and I would know what to do and I would know how to look after my babies. And, you know, at the start, it was really hard being a parent, but I didn't feel like I could turn to those in my network as much as I should have. So I kept a lot of it in because I was the perinatal psychologist. I should know this. I should be able to look after myself.
I think a lot of what you're saying resonates, you know, with I'm a psychologist as well. As you know, that's my original training background is in psychology. And now I'm moving a bit into coaching mothers of multiples. So a bit of a different shift in focus. But I know from even my own experience, there's a lot of, even now, my boys are I have twin boys that are 6. And there'll be times even when I think, why are they showing this behavior? Like, I'm a psychologist. Haven't I, you know, corrected this yet or prevented this? Like, why is this still happening at this age, you know? And I think that we can put a lot of pressure, regardless of our title, regardless of our profession, especially for first-time moms. And so I'm wondering, was that part of, do you think that played a bit into it as well? Are these your first children and your only?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They're my first and my only children.
Yes.
And I have always wanted to be a mum. Like I was the one in high school that people kind of would say, you know, you're going to be a great mum. I was expected to be a mum first. I think a lot of my nature, people expected that of me. And look, I'm a bit of an overachiever, a bit of an overfunctioner, to quote Brene Brown, you know, some perfectionistic tendencies, which a lot of us psychologists have.
Yeah.
And so when my husband and I were ready to have kids, I was going to do this so well. Like I was going to be like such a good pregnant woman and mum. And so I'd already kind of put some expectations on myself. And then having twins, I had to learn very quickly, lower my expectations. This was not going to be done perfectly, and that's okay. In a way, I'm actually really, really grateful for having twins because I think it forced me to lower my expectations of myself, and it allowed me to, I guess, shift away from some of the societal expectations of parenting, because parenting twins is different. If people would make recommendations to me, I would kind of be able to go, oh, yeah, like I'm really glad that works for you, but I don't quite think we'll be able to do that.
Could you speak to that a bit too? Because I think that that's something I've heard quite a bit from multiple birth families or parents, where the advice that's been given really doesn't feel applicable in the multiple birth situation. You know, it's something that, as you were saying earlier, you know, the research tends to be, even in my experience in reading the research, you know, we always hear about the mother-child dyad.
Yeah.
You know, as if the mother-child, as if it's supposed to be a parent with a single baby. And there's never this, you know, idea that there's, in some cases, there are multiple babies. And what do we do if we have 2 or 3 babies or more, you know? And the advice that we're given just really seems geared towards a singleton birth.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And, you know, it starts kind of right from the start. I remember being in NICU, and one of I don't know what her role was chastising me for not pumping every 3 hours. And I was trying to establish breastfeeding with both children, you know, one on the boob, top them up, put the other one on the boob, top them up with the tube. Thomas had tube feeding, and then, you know, pumping. And actually it wasn't physically possible to do that every 3 hours. But their expectation is women are meant to, when you're trying to get your milk in, you're trying to feed your baby, pump every 3 hours. So right from a couple of days on, the advice from the healthcare professionals where, the child health nurses that would come and visit us. I had a lot of trouble with Thomas's feeding. He was a refluxy baby. He was a colicky baby. And, they're going, try this, try that, try this. And I'm going, that's really great. But I have my twin Z pillow that a lot of multiple parents will know. I can't hold both of them to feed them at the same time. I have to have them in the pillow to do the bottles, or I wasn't able to continue breastfeeding because of edema. So it was bottle feeding, doctor's appointments. He's crying, he's screaming. I think there's something wrong. Babies cry. You just have to hold him for 24 hours. Okay, that's great. If I had one baby, I would love to have had one baby and hold them for 24 hours.
Yes.
But I've got two. They both have needs. So I found that, those early checks, it wasn't kind of getting shifted to accommodate practical ways to feed twins or to care for twins, and, sleep and things like that too. We had to just find our own way to do it. A lot of the programs were very geared to, rocking and doing this in minutes. And my two babies had different sleep needs. So they had different times that, they could sleep or they wanted to sleep. Mother's group. I was the only twin mum in mother's group. And so you're sitting there and everyone's sharing their experience, and the child health nurse is helping, with stuff. And I know that she was trying to be helpful by being like, oh, it might be a bit different for you, Caitlin. That might not be possible for you. And so you just kind of like, yeah, okay. You're the odd one out. And that can be a really good thing because you can follow your own journey. But I think when you're vulnerable and you're trying to figure it out and you're not quite sure what you're doing, you can feel a little bit lost.
Absolutely. And I think that as a first-time mom myself to twins, a lot of that resonates with me, in that I feel like there's almost this othering that happens. You feel kind of othered on the outer, or you just feel there's a lot of isolation. I mean, we speak about this a lot, and mothers just generally can feel isolated, particularly in that first year, because it is harder to get out of the house. But I think once you add more babies in the mix, as soon as you start adding more babies in the mix, it's almost like another layer of complexity. And I was even, it blows my mind when you speak about your experience in the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, and the advice that you were given when it's, I would have thought it's obvious that you actually have more than one baby to accommodate. And how can you possibly live up to some standard that, in terms of, hourly feeding schedules, that are just not going to work when you have more than one baby to care for. And in particular, it sounds like in some ways your babies were also very different, which can happen, right? With twins. I mean, they are unique individuals. They have different sleep needs, maybe even different feeding cycles or routines.
That was something that actually really surprised us. So you get prepped, unfortunately, or I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but the moment we found out we were having twins, your appointments are all about the risks. Yes. So, risk of preterm labor, risk of NICU. So in some ways we were prepared for some of those parts of our journey. What we weren't prepared for was that one would be in NICU and one wouldn't. I think I kind of had this expectation that with twins, they would be very similar. And a lot of people would say things like, getting it out of the way, two at the same time, And I know some people whose babies, especially with the identicals, were very similar, are very matched. But we joke in a kind way, they're my yin and yang, they're my night and day. I have a beautiful blonde, straight-haired boy and a gorgeous, dark, curly-haired girl. Their personalities are the opposites, and they came out very different. So right from the start, we had prepared for both of them being in NICU or special care. We'd even joked about, we'll go out for sushi. We tried to accept that our journey was different. How could we make the best of it? Maybe I could recover a little bit, get a little bit of sleep. But Thomas needed to stay in NICU and then special care. And Monica was up in my room the next day, which was wonderful in some ways. But right from the start, it was that reality of, okay, two completely different needs children, and I'm constantly going to feel like I'm letting one down.
Yeah, that hits home. I think that one of the things, I think from a psychological point of view, that I found really a real mind shift, I think that I had to go through myself, was feeling like I was letting them down somehow, because they always had to share me, and my attention was always, and even to this day, when they're together, is divided. And I don't know what the experience of people who have singletons, who have many singletons, let's say, or, a few, if they have a similar kind of feeling where they feel like they have to, their attention is divided between their children, or they feel like their children have to share them, and a guilt that's associated with that. But I know in speaking with multiple birth parents, that seems to be really common, that there's this, from the very beginning, you're really aware of the fact that your babies have to share you. Everything from feeding to, just your attention, really, your love, and I wonder, how did you manage that? What did you do to cope with that kind of adjustment?
I was very fortunate to have stumbled across a Janet Lansbury article. I can't tell you exactly when it was. I know we were all home by that point. And she specifically was answering someone's question about twins and what do you do when they're both crying. And she reminded the person who'd written in, and I really took it to heart, about the power of your voice. Mm. And, when you're a parent of twins, using what you've got.
Yes.
And so changing how you soothe your children, how you respond to your children. That gave me a lot of comfort at the start that, maybe I couldn't physically pick them both up. Maybe I couldn't physically feed them both when it was time. But I tried to hold on to that and do a lot of talking. Yeah, buddy, I can hear that you're ready for a cuddle. I'm just doing your sister's nappy right now. I will be with you. I would try and sing if I couldn't rock both of them. I mean, we got creative with wheels on bassinets and things, so I could try and rock both of them. But I think reading that article and accepting I won't be able to connect with and soothe my children the way that ideally I'd seen in my head of the physical holding and touching, but there are other ways I can help soothe them. And that's been really useful. It's continued through now. And I do think when we balance, it's really hard being a twin parent. There are some great positives that my kids are actually, for their age, quite patient, because the rhetoric in our house is, yep, I will be right with you.
Yes, yes.
I've done this. And I try and keep a bit of a tally in my head of alternating who I'm with. I'm not 100% sure when I found this out. I think they're a little bit older, but when I realized that twin babies can form a secure attachment to each other, the same type of secure attachment that a baby forms with a parent, that doesn't happen with singleton siblings, that is exclusive to multiple birth babies. And that was really nice because I view it as a shared load. Yes, they have to share me and they might miss out a little bit, but they get to share each other and they're there for each other. And maybe those moments that I'm not at my best because, it's stressful being a mum, they've got this comfort of this other little person that's there with them. So really trying to shift my mindset of this is, again, different to a singleton baby, different to a singleton child. I can soothe them and connect with them in a slightly different way using what I've got, which is my voice. And I can take some comfort that they're comforting each other. And look, they gang up on me all the time now, so I know that's a strong bond. Yeah. But it was nice to know it's not all on me. It's not just me and baby and their dad, who's very, very involved, but they're supporting each other. They're feeling connected to each other. They're helping each other through the hard times with their physical presence. So I think that's a really comforting and really cool thing about twins that makes them a bit different in a good way.
Hi there, fierce kind mama. Are you expecting multiples and wondering how you're going to cope when the babies arrive? Or do you already have multiples at home and wonder, will this ever get easier? First of all, let me say loud and clear, I get it. Feeling overwhelmed in motherhood is really common, And us mothers of multiples are particularly prone to feeling sometimes like it's all too much. I know for myself that becoming a first-time mother to twins at the age of 40 was a huge adjustment, physically and psychologically. So I've taken my years of training in mental health and my experience coaching mothers of multiples and put together a guide with my 5 top tips for overcoming overwhelm as a multiple birth parent. This guide is free, of course, and it doesn't matter what age multiples you have. You may be pregnant, or your multiples might have already left home. The principles apply to all parents of multiples. And because I know you're short on time, I've broken down the tips into easy-to-read chunks that you can begin implementing straight away. You can get your free copy now by signing up at my website, fiercekindmama.com. Yeah, and I think that's beautiful to point out. And I think I've read somewhere, and I can't quite recall, it doesn't come to mind right now, the research article, but it was talking about the protective effect of a twinship, and that twins who tend to live longer on average, just because of the fact that there's something about the twinship that is protective, and it's a beautiful idea to think that that bond that twins have or multiples have with one another, that can really be not just soothing when they're young, and that they may rely on each other, but that's kind of a lifelong advantage that they have. Even that I think is really cool to just keep that in the back of our minds, particularly when we're in the thick of maybe juggling babies, work, tantrums, and stressful parenting stuff that comes up all the time. It can be sometimes helpful to shift that focus, can't it? Yes, having twins is hard. Yes, parenting multiples can be difficult, but there are some benefits, and that definitely is one of them. Yeah. So I'd love for you to share with us a little bit more about some of the work that you do. So you were saying you're a perinatal psychologist prior to having twins. Are you still in that field, in that area, or what are you doing now?
Yeah, so I'm in private practice, still exclusively perinatal. So supporting individuals on their journeys to becoming parents. And the way I often describe it is, unfortunately, the things that don't go to plan, the bumps along the way. So the fertility, the traumatic birth. I really enjoy supporting families who've had a NICU experience, because I know personally how stressful it is. And I think it can be nice to be able to offer therapy for people who don't necessarily have to explain all the ins and outs. So for a twin mum to come and see me, she doesn't have to clarify certain things. There's things I just know. For people who've, been in NICU or special care, they're not maybe needing to explain some of the terminology as much. That I've been told it's comforting for clients to know that there's some understanding of those experiences. And what is unfortunate is that the people that I'd most love to support often can't come to therapy. Like being a twin parent, and in those first years, it's really, really hard to get anywhere, to get out of the house. And there is so much extra care that's required for your kids. Statistically, the rates of anxiety and depression and postnatal issues are so much higher in multiple parents, but yet the time restrictions often mean that they can't come. I'm hoping at some point when the twins are maybe a little bit older, because I've had this idea for ages that I've just not been able to action, being time poor, but I'd love to create resources that could be accessible, to people. If they can't make it to therapy, they can still read some stuff that might help on their journey.
Yes, that's right. And I think you're speaking to exactly part of the reason that I, started this podcast, and the coaching business that I have is really meant to capture a wider audience that can be, I guess, in some ways disadvantaged because of the time factor, but also just getting out of the house and, getting all the kids ready or the babies, into the car just to see a psychologist. I also feel like there's, a cohort, maybe a smaller cohort, but of multiple birth parents who don't necessarily meet criteria for a mental health condition, but they're still struggling with the demands of parenting and raising multiple. So this is part of the reason why, I am motivated to help those people, because I see a lot of myself in that too, and it would have been great, right? To have a resource, to have someone you could go to, even if it's online, and even to have a group that's kind of online. I know there are a lot of, in Australia, we are very fortunate to have associations like the Australian Multiple Birth Association, lots of Facebook groups that, people can kind of be a member of. But it's really nice to be able to connect, I think, also with professionals who understand the demands of raising multiples. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's great that you're doing this work. And so can I ask you, what are some of the main, I guess, maybe concerns or challenges that people come to you, multiple birth parents, when they come to you? What are some of the main issues and challenges they come to you with in therapy?
Usually they're coming in because they're experiencing a postnatal anxiety or depression or high stress. Well, that's why they think they're coming in. Often, when I'm talking to them, it's burnout, it's parental burnout, it's physical exhaustion. Yes, you're feeling all the symptoms of anxiety and depression, but a lot of it is so situational. Sadly, most twin births or multiple births are traumatic. Usually they're premature births or there's a high need for medical intervention. A lot of multiples end up in NICU or special care. So most of us have a bit of a rough start, and then we're expected to hit the ground running. And so many, I see a lot of women. I love seeing dads too, but often it's women that come and see me. I'm seeing a lot of people that are coming in because they're worried that they're too angry or that they've got an anger problem. And then once we start unpacking it, they had a traumatic birth that they didn't have a chance to process. They had a traumatic NICU or special care experience that they didn't have a chance to process. And I'm usually seeing people when they're twins or about 2 or 3, they've finally been able to catch a breath. Life has gotten a tiny bit easier, but they have had years of stressful experience, years of feeling othered, years of kind of missing out, not quite being able to do what their singleton friends were able to do. As you mentioned before, it's quite isolating being a twin parent. And something that comes up a lot in my sessions that I notice for myself is that we don't even acknowledge or realize or give ourselves permission to fully say how hard it is, because it's a weird in-between space. I went into spontaneous labor at 35 weeks. And when I say that, I'm like, I was so lucky. Like, I kept them in till 35 weeks. Like, that's awesome. Because I got to hospital and the midwives and the doctors, good on you, 35 weeks. That's amazing. For a twin pregnancy, yeah, that's great. Only 3 weeks in NICU and special care, only 1 there. We were so lucky. Yet I didn't want to have a premature birth. I didn't want to have 3 weeks away from my son, but because they weren't 28 weekers, 26 weekers, because we didn't have a 10 to 12 week journey in NICU, because fortunately we have no ongoing health complaints. It's this weird space of a lot of twin parents feel like, well, I can't really complain about my bit because I know there were people that were worse. And I think that that's the same when they hit the parenting years. It's actually really, really stressful parenting little people and trying to parent 2 who are a similar developmental stage and have similar needs. Other people on the outside might have said I was an angry person when I had 2-year-olds. I wasn't an angry person. I was stressed and I was overwhelmed and I was trying my best to be a good parent to twins. And there was a lot that I couldn't do that other people could do. And so I felt like I was missing out a little bit. So all of that, of course, is going to make us feel pretty crappy. So I see a lot of people who it's not until we start unpacking that they can actually give themselves permission to go, yeah, I have had a pretty rough time. I could understand why I'm feeling like that. Because I would have people come up to me when they were little, oh, twins, like, gosh, how do you do it? That's my worst nightmare. Or, oh, wow, you're amazing. You're a superwoman. Look at you go. So you actually get a lot of feedback from others, either negative or positive, that then I think makes it hard to go, yeah, this is actually hard. Like, you don't want to validate the person that's like, that's my worst nightmare.
Yes.
I love having twins because I do. I love being a twin parent. I love my twins. And then when people are like, oh, you're doing such a great job, you're amazing, I couldn't do it. You don't want to be like, oh, I'm struggling. This is really hard for me. So
Yeah.
sadly, I feel like so many parents of multiples, we really just kind of take it on, and then we judge ourselves too harshly because we're not giving ourselves enough grace that, especially in those early years, this is rough. It takes a lot of energy. We're very sleep deprived. And
Yes.
we feel like we're always failing because we're letting one down, if not both. So I love offering a space to people to help them make sense of that and help them realize that they're not a bad mum and they're not a bad person, that this is a hard journey. And I try and make space for the end. You can be really grateful that your babies were born at 35 weeks and really sad that they came earlier than a singleton would.
Yes.
You can be so grateful that you have beautiful twins with a beautiful bond and feel really stressed by parenting both of them.
Yeah.
It's not exclusive. It's not a one or the other, but we need to make space for all of the emotions and feelings that come with this journey.
Yes, I think that's a beautiful point. And I think when you were speaking, I was reminded of, even in my own experience when I was pregnant, I was either seen, I think, by others as one of two extremes. It was either I was really, really lucky, like what a blessing, what a miracle, or really, really unlucky, right? Like, oh, geez, I would never, I wouldn't want to be in your situation. I wouldn't want to have twins. And so it's really hard for us, I think, as multiple birth parents to find our place. And I think there is a lot of healing that needs to be done. In fact, when you were speaking, it reminded me, in one of the modules in my coaching program is titled Healing Old Wounds.
Yeah.
Because I think that as a multiple birth parent, what we often need, even if we're not aware of it, is that space to heal from what is often, from the very beginning, usually an unexpected spontaneous pregnancy, unexpected birthing experience, some form of complication, usually, not always, but, sometimes in terms like what you were talking about, prematurity or breastfeeding difficulties, like nothing is what we necessarily would have asked for or imagined when we thought, I want to get pregnant, So I do think it is this process where, as multiple birth parents, we do need to come to some level of giving ourselves permission to feel that it's okay. It's okay that I feel upset by this experience. And yes, I'm lucky. Okay, I am lucky. I have twins, that on some level, I am fortunate that they arrived and they're both safe. But it's okay for me to also feel some disappointment, or even, dare I say, regret.
Yeah.
Or ambivalence.
Absolutely. One thing that's really helped me as the twins have gotten older is we talk, the therapy term of radical acceptance. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're fully okay with it or it's okay that it happened, but to accept this is my situation and this is what we're going to do. Yeah. And the more that I went, you know what, I've got twins. I'm just not going to be that mum that can go to the coffee shop after mother's group. And that's just how we're doing it. Just accepting, I will have my friendships online. I met some wonderful twin mums. We had a great group chat that was going all the time. That was my mother's group. Accepting that I can't take, 2-year-olds to the park if it's just me. I will wait till the weekend when another adult can come with me. So really accepting that this is how it is and we're going to need to do it a little bit differently. And I'm allowed to be a bit bitter about it. I'm allowed to have days that I feel a bit resentful. I wish I could just do X. And then other days being like, but I can't. So this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there is a bit of creativity and that needs to, I guess, come into play here as well. Multiple birth parents do need to think a little bit outside of the box, which can be a good thing. But then there's also, I guess, when you were speaking, I was thinking about the, not being able to complain.
Yeah.
Right. And almost like, what really came to my mind was the image of, I had a difficult birth in that it was a cesarean that had to happen very quickly. So I didn't have much time to decide on that, but I had to make the decision and I was told much safer to have a cesarean. This is what we recommend. So I went with that. But I remember being in such incredible pain after the operation. And But I also remember feeling very pressured to get up straight away.
Yeah.
Get up straight away. You have to see your babies in special care nursery. You have to try to establish breastfeeding. You got to get up, go see them. And I physically couldn't. Like I physically could not get out of the bed. I was in excruciating pain. And I just think that there is so much pressure on women in general, but this is probably not even just specific to multiple birth parents, but just so much pressure on women to just get up and do it, especially after something like that, where they've just had a massive surgery, and I think that that's just one example, but I think there's many of these examples where there's these expectations of mothers. Specifically, I'm now talking more specifically around mothers. I know that I don't want to exclude men in this or fathers in this, but I'm talking more specifically about almost the standards, the impossible standards that we feel we need to live by,
Yeah. It's a huge thing that I talk about, in my practice. And it's crazy when you think about a cesarean is such a major surgery. It's a huge physical trauma for your body. They cut through so many layers of tissue. And if you're in a car accident, you would be in a trauma ward and you would have rehab and you would have therapy. But because it's a cesarean and that's how you've birthed your children, you just need to get up and get on with it. And I think this makes it really hard for women to figure out their motherhood identity, to adjust to how they want to do it, that there is no time to catch your breath. And especially, I think an extra layer of that is with twins. I feel like there is even more pressure because with one baby, if you have a partner, if you're fortunate enough to have a partner, they can kind of really share the load at the start. But with twins, ideally, you have a partner that's helping as well. So they've got one baby and you've got the other.
Yeah.
That it really pushes the expectations that we put on ourselves for physical recovery or no physical recovery because we don't have time, because we've got to get on with it. And that's how our motherhood journey starts. And then it's almost like there's no pause, there's no time. Whereas I think a little bit differently with singletons, ideally, they do have some naps, or there is a bit of an easier way to tag team with the other parent for people who aren't single parents. But with twins, if one's awake, the other's asleep. If your partner's home from work, they're helping with one, you're doing the other. So I feel especially for the first couple of years, you really are on this hamster wheel, that there's just always more to do.
Yeah.
And then you wonder, why am I so snappy? Why am I so angry? Why am I crying at the supermarket? But you've not even had any time to think about all you've done. So a lot of women that come to me have a lot of judgment. I know I was very judgmental of myself. I should have this together. I should be doing this better. I should be coping better. Because I hadn't even had a moment to wrap my head around just how huge this all was to explain why I was having a hard time.
Yeah. I'm loving this conversation, and it speaks to so many challenges, I think, that are unique to having multiple birth, having a multiple birth pregnancy and having twins or more than one baby. I'd love for us to end the conversation with, what are your top, I guess, tips for multiple birth parents who might be, starting out on this journey? Maybe they're a bit further along, but what do you feel are, what advice would you give to them?
The first piece of advice that I give to everyone is write your own rules. Do this your way. Step back from whatever the main parenting modalities, Instagram, child health nurse, whoever it is, just really get more connected with your situation. Who is in your world that's involved in helping? Who are your children if they've been born yet, and what do they need? And really trying to kind of create this special bubble and set expectations that are realistic for your situation. A couple of times my husband and I tried to go out for breakfast. It was too early. It just wasn't going to work age-wise, and we were very disappointed by that. And so we stopped. We just weren't a family that could go out for breakfast anymore. But he would go to the shops and he would get ingredients and he would cook a lovely breakfast that we could have from home. So just finding ways, as you said before, creativity, kind of trying to figure out what works for you and focus on what's possible as opposed to what you feel you should be doing. So kind of marching to the beat of your own drum, figuring it out your way based on your personal situation and your kids and what their needs are. It was probably the most helpful for me. The second is accept all of your emotions, that it is okay to not like this. It is okay to find this hard. It is okay to be tired. It does not mean you don't love your kids. It does not mean anything negative, but we really have to make space for feeling our feelings. We really have to make space for being able to say this is hard and taking away that but, because it's so easy to go, oh, but blah, blah, blah. No, it's just hard. It's hard today. Hopefully tomorrow it won't be hard, but it's hard today. It is exhausting to parent multiple children. I always would joke about it's kind of like we've got 3 because we've got 2 kids and then the interaction between them. So when you're thinking about the time out that you might need or the self-care that you might need, it's really important to acknowledge how exhausting this is. So I guess the third tip is plan for the marathon. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. So we've really got to find ways to have those little moments to ourselves, whether it's 10 minutes to sit outside on the grass or do a lap around the block, that we have to work those breaks in. I know that it feels really hard to do. I know I'm not very good at implementing it myself because there is always more that needs to be done. There is always a child that needs you. My husband and I got very good with tag teaming, and it would mean that one of us would have to leave the house while the other one was there with screaming babies. And it is so easy to go, I won't go because I'll stay and help you. But then you run yourself into the ground, you burn yourself up. So we kind of approached it as a bit of like, you work really hard when you're in the house, but you also get a moment to rest hard out of the house, rather than we've all got to do it all the time, all together, and then we both fall into a heap.
Yeah.
And the last tip is that knowing that twins have a special bond, go a bit easier on yourself, that you don't have to be everything for them, that they're there for each other too. So if you are really not feeling good, if you are having a really bad day and you just need a moment, put them in the cot together and, go and take 5 minutes to breathe outside. Leave them on the play mat, like giggling and laughing at each other, and sit and have your cup of tea, just to kind of acknowledge the little role that they can play and to give some hope for those that are earlier on. It does get better. It absolutely gets better. Like, I now can do a lot more than some of my friends of singletons can, because my twins play beautifully. So they can go outside and they can play imagination game. And instead of, Mom, will you do this with me? Will you do this with me? And look, it still happens a lot. But I have this, go and ask your sister, go and ask your brother. I'm sure they'd love to do that with you.
Yeah.
So it's really, really hard at the start. And we've got to be careful to look after ourselves, because it is really hard at the start. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. And those, easier periods where there's not as much pressure on you definitely are coming.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you so much for the wonderful advice you've given today and for sharing your story, your personal experience, as well as your professional experience. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you've heard, then please consider subscribing and leaving a review so that other expectant and current parents of multiples like yourself can find this podcast and the valuable information it contains. I would be so very grateful if you left a review and shared this with anyone you think could benefit from listening. If you have a particular topic you'd like me to cover on this podcast, feel free to reach out to me via my website, fiercekindmama.com, or connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Fierce Kind Mama of Multiples. New episodes are released every fortnight, so we'll see you back here real soon. Any advice and information in this podcast is general only and has been prepared without taking into account your particular circumstances and needs. For tailored, individualized advice, please consult with a qualified professional.